This hearing of the Subcommittee on the Biotechnology, Horticulture, and Research, titled Economic Opportunities from Local Agriculture Markets, will come to order. Good morning, and thank you for joining us as we discuss how farmers and ranchers across the country are capitalizing off local agricultural markets. Today's farmers and ranchers have an incredibly challenging job. We expect these individuals to feed a growing world, be good stewards of the land, and navigate an increasingly complex global economy. While these ideals are admirable, farmers and ranchers ultimately cannot achieve these goals if their operations are not financially viable to support themselves and their families. Simply put, the economics must work for others to be realized. This challenge has been increasingly difficult in recent years as the farm economy continues to lag. Despite this downturn, farmers and ranchers have seen a surge in consumer interest for foods that were produced locally. As consumers become more connected to the story of their food, we see producers across this nation seeking out new business opportunities directly with shoppers to increase their margins and keep their operations viable. In the 2017 Census of Agriculture, USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service reported that over 159,000 farmers and ranchers were selling directly to consumers. The value of their products sold, either directly to consumers or into local retail markets, was over $11.8 billion, representing 3% of total food sales. As consumer demand continues to grow, these sales from local markets present a strong economic opportunity for our farmers and ranchers. Within the horticulture title of the 2018 Farm Bill is a program called the Local Agriculture Markets Program, or LAMP. This program combined two existing initiatives, the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program and the Value Added Producer Grant, into one program with a collective focus on helping farmers and ranchers take advantage of local markets. Projects funded by LAMP aim to better connect farmers and ranchers and consumers and to help producers increase the margins they receive on their products. This committee reauthorized these programs in the 2018 Farm Bill, and I am glad to see LAMP receive $50 million in annual mandatory funding over the life of our legislation. This step forward represents a strong investment by Congress and a commitment to support the development of these local agricultural markets. Moving forward, it is my goal to ensure that the recent restructuring of the LAMP programs contributes to and does not detract from the underlying goals of the previously separate Value-Added Producer Grants program and the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion program. Each program supports an important mission, and I will be watching USDA's implementation to make sure these programs continue to operate as Congress intended. During this subcommittee hearing, we will receive testimony from farmers and advocates from across the country who are working to support successful local agricultural markets. I look forward to hearing their perspectives and to learn how we can better support market opportunities for farmers and ranchers in our districts. In consultation with the ranking member and pursuant to Rule 11E, I want to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today, such as myself. I recognize Ranking Member Dunn for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning. We meet again as our farmers and ranchers back home continue to face tough times, whether it's a new pest or disease process or shortage in good labor, dwindling lists of crop protection tools, the list goes on and on. An economy that is booming for so many others is still not providing much needed relief for many people in the agricultural industry. And despite these circumstances, maybe even due to these circumstances, many farmers and ranchers are engaging in some innovative strategies to develop new marketing channels to get their products into the hands of the consumers. Today's hearing is a good opportunity to discuss both the merits and the challenges to development of local and regional agricultural systems. Today's American consumer tends to care more about where their food is sourced and how it was produced. Strengthening ties between producers and consumers is a worthy goal, especially since the average individual in America is at least 3 generations removed from production agriculture. Direct marketing channels are a great opportunity for farmers and ranchers to foster a relationship with their consumers, establishing trust that benefits the industry as a whole. Local agricultural systems have their challenges. In order to succeed, many farmers and ranchers need to market a larger volume of product than their local markets can handle. They may also be located far away from their consumer populations interested in purchasing their product. Or they may be growing a commodity that is better suited for further processing by food and industrial manufacturers not located nearby. This challenge extends to the consumer. If all food were locally sourced, consumers would not have the same access to a wide range of fruits and vegetables year-round. And consumers would also be subject to a wide range of ups and downs in prices that result from sourcing from limited local areas. Despite these challenges, local and regional agricultural systems continue to be one of the many opportunities for farmers and ranchers to increase the value of their product and satisfy the American consumer. And I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. And I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with us. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you so much. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so the witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there is ample time for questions. With that, I would like to welcome each of our witnesses. Thank you so much for being here today. At this time, I would like to introduce our first witness, Mrs. Sommer Sibley Brown, the founder and executive director of the Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition. Mrs. Sibley Brown's organization was founded in 2012 and is working across the territory to better connect farmers, businesses, and consumers to healthy food options and economic opportunities. I'd now like to recognize myself to make an introduction as well of Minnesota's second witness here. It's my pleasure to introduce my constituent, Kathy Seaman, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. Kathy started working with MFMA in September 2012. She is also the owner of Simple Harvest Farm Organics in Nerstrand, Minnesota, and is an occasional vendor at Riverwalk Market Fair in Northfield. Kathy first became aware of MFMA in 2009 when she was part of the effort to create Riverwalk Market Fair and attended an MFMA conference in Owatonna where she was impressed by the speakers and resources offered at that event. Kathy has spent most of her career in agriculture and brings those connections to MFMA, which has helped us build stronger collaborations with diverse groups and has paved the way for successful public policy efforts. Kathy's favorite vegetable is any green leafy vegetable, but by far her favorite all-time food is milk. Welcome to you, Kathy, and thank you so much for being here today. Our third witness is Mr. Clay Oliver, the owner of Oliver Oil Company from Pitts, Georgia. In addition to his time spent on a multi-generational farm, Mr. Oliver's business makes cold-pressed artisan cooking oils from locally produced sunflowers, pecans, and peanuts. The fourth and final witness is Mr. Brett Erickson, the Senior Vice President of Business Affairs at J&D Produce, Inc. from Edinburgh, Texas. Prior to his current role, Mr. Erickson served as President and CEO of the Texas International Produce Association. Thank you so much to the four of you for being here today. We will now proceed to hear from our witnesses. Each of you will have 5 minutes to present testimony. When the light turns yellow, that indicates that there is 1 minute left to complete your testimony. Ms. Sibley Brown, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Chairwoman Plaskett and Ranking Member Dunn and Congresswoman Craig for the opportunity to testify regarding issues impacting the success and resilience of local and regional food systems. I'm Sommer Sibley Brown, founder and executive director of Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition. I'm not a farmer, but I am tied to agriculture and I'm tied to food. We all are. The Virgin Islands agricultural community is comprised of approximately 300 producers across 4 islands, 10% of which are full-time producers whose farm size ranges from 1/4 of an acre to 10 acres. The other 90% are part-time producers and home-based producers. The ratio of full-time to part-time producers that support our local food system, coupled with a 99% import rate, creates a unique dynamic. Nevertheless, when it comes to agriculture, we are a community of strong will despite our fragile food system. The barriers that I will address in this testimony are the ones that I see pertinent to the efficient development of an effective local and regional food system: fiscal and financial resource allocations, community infrastructure, and social capacity. The Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition has identified funding and resource allocation as a major barrier. There has been no significant investment in building up our food system. We do not have the same access and assets as other parts of the nations. Our territory is not equipped through local government and small business to do the type of investment seen in the mainland or in large metropolitan locations. While the United States Department of Agriculture has a progressive grant-making portfolio and a competitive grant structure with programmatic criteria that provides equal funding opportunities, this is not done equitably. The current USDA grant structure assumes that every applicant has capacity, staffing, partnership, technical skills, and community support to write such proposals. For example, the value-added producer grant requires a non-federal funding match that is at least equal to the amount of the federal funding requested. The Farmers Market Promotion Program and Local Food Promotion Program grants require a 25% match. Therefore, communities like the U.S. Virgin Islands, with the least assets, a shortage of technical expertise, limited resources for matching opportunities, and a higher level of need often go underserved. Another barrier for us to increase production, reduce the import rate, and create a healthy and local regional food system is the infrastructure issues. Currently, in the territory's model, the farming community is primarily dependent on services provided through the Virgin Islands Department of Agriculture. Through qualitative interviews and post-hurricane community food assessments, farmers echoed their frustration around access to water and land preparations. These services are primarily conducted by our local Department of Agriculture. This is sad, realizing that farmers in the contiguous United States have much different protocols for preparing and managing their land. There are different technical trainings, provisions, and access to capital that exist on the mainland than those that are afforded in the territory, leaving a stark difference in land control and preparation. We need the opportunity to engage in capacity planning for our supply chain. This could include assisting producers in determining production scale and market demands. There's a great opportunities for producers to supply wholesale local food to hotel and cruise line markets. There are opportunities to create a plethora of value-added food-related businesses that can fill gaps in the supply chain. However, we also need the opportunities to train persons in the community to lead these entrepreneurial endeavors, which sheds light on another issue: lack of access to training and certifications that could bolster our food system. My final barrier I would like to highlight today is social capacity. When considering our regional relationships and what would be most beneficial, I would like to look at the USDA structure for assigning territories and regions. Our state rural development office is in Gainesville, Florida. Our local area office is in the Virgin Islands. But in Farm to School, we are paired with the Mid-Atlantic region. The regions are not consistent. We are not similar regarding scale, environment, transportation needs, governance structure, or even culture. The territory would greatly benefit from opportunities to be paired with other islands and territories to learn from their lessons. Our territory is comprised of socially disadvantaged populations. However, we are still asked to deliver and withstand the same procedures as the mainland. I would be remiss if I did not use this opportunity to state the need to excavate the deep social, cultural, and structural barriers impacting the local and regional food system of the territory, one of which includes the policies at play within the USDA Farm Bill. Once again, I would like to thank the subcommittee for giving me the opportunity to testify before you today on the needs of advocates like myself when it comes to resiliency of our local and regional food system.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sibley Brown. Ms. Seaman, please proceed with your testimony.
Chairwoman Plaskett, Ranking Member Dunn, and Congresswoman Craig, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Kathy Seaman. I am the Executive Director of the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, and I'm also an organic livestock farmer in Rice County, where I direct market eggs and the meats, as well as value-added farm products like my goat milk soap and wool dryer balls from my Icelandic sheep. Both I and MFMA are members of the Minnesota Farmers Union, and I'd like to thank National Farmers Union and MFU for the leadership opportunities they afford farmers like me and for their support for building local food sheds in Minnesota and throughout the country. I'm here today to share my perspective on local food system development in Minnesota and the federal grant programs housed under the umbrella of the Local Agriculture Market Program, or LAMP, especially the Farmers Market Promotion Program, FMPP. These programs are incredibly important for strengthening the local food shed in Minnesota. They have improved the viability and profitability of many farm businesses, including mine. Local food sales and system capacity have grown tremendously over the past several decades. As an example, in Minnesota, we started out with 15 farmers markets in 1998, and last year we grew to 302. To help local food systems sustain their growth and serve their communities, and to help organizations like MFMA continue to build our capacity and serve our members, there is a need for strategic investment through federally funded programs like LAMP. Farmers and ranchers, on average, receive only about 15 cents of every food dollar that consumers spend. But at farmers markets, farmers capture a much larger share. These markets can be a boon for local economies by creating local jobs and by driving business to nearby brick and mortar stores. MFMA's vision has 3 planks. We want to cultivate a vibrant local foods community, provide accessibility to local farm fresh foods, and allow for opportunities for our local food producers to thrive and grow. Our third and second planks, however, making local food accessible while ensuring that our local food producers receive a fair price, can at times be at odds. We help bridge that gap in part thanks to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. MFMA has been supportive of Market Bucks administered by Hunger Solutions Minnesota, which doubles SNAP EBT purchases up to $10, dollar for dollar. However, monitoring and making SNAP available at farmers markets is difficult for everyone. Incidentally, the viability of accepting SNAP benefits at farmers markets was first tested through FMPP grants. FMPP grants have been essential to the development of farmers markets broadly. Because these grants fund community-wide and statewide projects rather than just individuals, their benefits are often far-reaching. Moreover, the entities eligible for FMPP grants truly need these funds. In many cases, organizations that do the farmers market work and local food capacity building are not able to secure loans, venture capital, or other vital resources. In 2014, we received an FMPP grant called Developing Sustainable Farmers Markets in Minnesota. We traveled across the state offering 8 one-day farmers market academies to market managers and vendors with a focus on profitability and food safety. We taught 548 attendees, completed 78 one-on-one consultations with markets and vendors to optimize their sales, and introduced many folks to our organization. In 2017, MFMA advised on a 3-year FMPP grant received by the University of Minnesota with a focus on the 7-county Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. That project gathered metrics on customers, vendors, partners, and prospective vendors. In 2019, 70 markets with about 13 unique vendors participated in the project, with 11,200 market visitors completing the surveys. Overall, the data that we collected through this project taught us that we need more data and research on our local food systems, and that we need to continue to refine our methods of data collection. This grant only allowed us to capture data on 7 counties. We have 80 more counties in Minnesota that have farmers markets. If we understood our markets better, we could better then invest in our local farm and food systems, and then we would be able to grow that market even more sustainably. While FMPP has been immensely valuable to date, there are certainly opportunities for program improvement. Local and regional food system development is typically carried out by smaller and sometimes under-resourced community organizations. These organizations know the communities in which they're embedded, and they should be integral to the local food development system. As you know, the 2018 Farm Bill requested a 25% matching grant requirement. We would advocate to have, we would welcome waiving that match on a case-by-case basis for certain organizations that are under-resourced. Local food, whether direct to consumer via farmers markets or other marketing channels, has cemented itself as part of the food system in the U.S. We are grateful that lawmakers mandated permanent mandatory funding to LAMP in 2018 Farm Bill. I look forward to working with all of you in the future local food systems, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Seaman. Mr. Oliver, please begin.
Good morning, Subcommittee Chairwoman Plaskett, Ranking Member Dunn, and members of the Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you about my family's farm and the Value-Added Producer Grant Program. My name is Clay Oliver, and I'm the owner of Oliver Farm Artisan Oils. We're a small family business located in Pitts, Georgia. Currently, we produce oils from 6 different seeds and nuts. Our oils are sold in retail-sized bottles up to industrial volumes. Cold-pressed and unrefined, our oils taste like the seed or nut that they are extracted from. They retain their vitamins and healthy nutrients because of the slow, gentle way they're processed, and they can be used in many ways. At Oliver Farm, we also mill our defatted meal after the oil pressing into finely ground flours. These seeds and nut flours offer a tasty gluten-free option to wheat and grain flours for those with grain allergies and as a tasty twist on classic desserts. I grew up on a small family farm near Pitts in Wilcox County. My father was a 4th generation to buy and live on the same land. He worked hard to make it during the 70s and 80s as a small dry land farmer. My mother and father strived to provide and improve our way of life and instilled in me a strong work ethic and desire to learn that I'm very thankful for. I worked on the farm for my daddy and at other jobs throughout my youth. After college and a brief time working in education, I found myself back on the farm working for my father and eventually with my brother Clint. Clint and I rented a 500-acre farm on our own and worked as partners for about 10 years. Then on April 18th, 2008, my father died suddenly of a heart attack at age 55. My mother, Jerice, Clint, and I were thrust into roles we did not anticipate overnight. As you know, during 2008, the Great Recession began, and people all over felt the effects. Our fuel prices skyrocketed, and there was a lot of talk about alternative fuel sources. That sparked in me an interest that I knew very little about, and I began researching and visiting oil plants, learning everything I could about this. My initial thought was to make my own fuel and supplement what we used. However, the equipment's expensive, and the savings on fuel would not pay for the equipment for a long time. I was very fortunate to meet some people who influenced me to consider growing, processing, and selling food-grade oils. After spending some time thinking about it and doing my research, I fell in love with the idea of growing and processing sunflower oil on our farm. And that's when the Lord began to open some doors for me. In 2012, I grew my first crop of sunflowers for oil production, and by the end of that year, we had pressed oil from sunflowers, pecans, and peanuts, all grown in our county. From that time until now, I've slowly grown our little business and awareness of the benefits of cold-pressed oils. Our little artisan oil business has been so successful that after 17 years of teaching, my wife left school to help with us in the business. We have 2 beautiful daughters, Maggie and Molly, that also help when they're not in school. When I made the decision to pursue my dream, I knew I would need guidance from the Georgia Department of Agriculture and soon joined their marketing program, Georgia Grown. Through my involvement with Georgia Grown, I first became aware of the Value-Added Producer Program and that I might qualify for it. Then I met Al Burns with USDA Rural Development in Georgia, and he encouraged me to apply for the Value-Added Producer Grant. I did, and in 2015, Oliver Farm was awarded a matching $250,000 working capital grant. The funds were used for processing, sales, and marketing. The impact of the grant was phenomenal for our company. Having a trained operator allowed me time to focus on other things and led to an overall increase in our production. The money we used to enter new markets helped build awareness of our brand and a connection to the people. The money I used for marketing opened doors not only for immediate sales, but relationships to be established and a sense of community beyond our little farm began to form. The Value-Added Producer Grant money we used for advertising was not only successful in growing awareness of our brand, it's also opened doors for new opportunities as consumers ask for new products and tourism-related ventures. For instance, increased requests for on-farm visits and direct purchasing has led Valerie and I to invest in a storefront and event space. Overall, Value-Added Producer Grant gave me support and encouragement to take a leap of faith and grow my business beyond my means. Though it required getting out of my comfort zone in many ways, without a doubt, it made our business stronger. The paperwork is daunting, and until I was familiar with the process, it was confusing. Thankfully, I had an awesome grant manager I worked with, and he was readily available to put me on the right track. If I could change one thing about VAPG, it would be that the money received is not considered taxable income. I've already made it and been taxed on it once. It doesn't seem fair to be taxed on it again. Looking forward, I hope that Oliver Farm Artisan Oils will continue to be a leader in the good food movement by producing high-quality, straight-off-the-farm oils and by building a stronger sense of community through our partnerships with other makers and consumers and to rebuild the local fresh food presence in my hometown of Pitts through our new store. Thank you for this opportunity to testify about my family's farm and the value of the Value-Added Producer Grant. Thank you for funding programs like it in the new LAMP program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Erickson, we're ready whenever you're ready to begin.
Hello, good morning, Chairwoman Plaskett, Ranking Member Dunn, and committee members. My name is Brett Erickson. I'm Senior Vice President of Business Affairs at J&D Produce. I've worked in agriculture my entire career. Prior to joining J&D, I was President and CEO of Texas International Produce Association and Executive Vice President for Texas Vegetable Association for almost 6 years. I am very familiar with the challenges you're exploring here today. As a former association executive, I spent a good amount of time developing ways to help promote and sustain local agriculture in our state of Texas. J&D is a family-owned and operated business headquartered in Edinburgh, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. Our owners, Jimmy and Diane Bassetti, moved from Vineland, New Jersey to McAllen, Texas in 1984 and started the business in '86. J&D is truly an American dream that continues to thrive today. We are a grower, packer, shipper of fresh greens, sweet onions, cabbage, and melons. To give you an idea of the diversity of crops we grow, we produce almost 30 different types of greens alone, including kales, chards, collards, mustard greens, kohlrabi, beets, and herbs, to name a few. Most of the products we offer are grown on our land and managed by our own people. However, we also work very closely with many other farmers in South Texas and handle their produce as well. Our company helps those farmers by harvesting, washing, packing, marketing, selling, and collecting on those sales. We also help with things such as food safety, financing, and regulatory compliance for our smaller growers who might not otherwise have the ability to juggle those activities. Although our company may not be the 5 or 10 acre farm, we are very much still a family operation. The Bassettis know each and every employee by name. We are engaged in the local community in a wide range of activities. The Rio Grande Valley Citrus and Vegetable Day, which introduces young children in 4-H and FFA to the harvesting, growing, and marketing of fruits and vegetables. Local donations of produce to the elementary school and high schools. Providing produce for the Healthy South Texas Initiative with Texas A&M, donating and selling product to Feeding Texas Food Bank System, donating and participating in school gardens and salad bar initiatives in our communities. Not to mention, we sell directly to local restaurants and schools, as well as hosting dietitians and chefs and children to tour our farms and packing operations to help promote and educate our local community about agriculture and fresh produce at the local level. We also invest time and money in the local universities as they develop and refine agricultural curriculum to develop local talent to fill our future job needs. Attracting talent to the Rio Grande Valley can be challenging. We know recruiting local talent for future jobs in Texas will be most sustainable for our industry. We work hard to support our community and to ensure that the citizens who live in Texas have access to locally grown, fresh, safe, nutritious, and healthy fruits and vegetables. We sell to numerous local restaurants and regional grocery chains in Texas, such as H-E-B, United, Whole Foods, Kroger, and we work hard to promote the fresh fruits and vegetables that we grow. Locally grown is very meaningful to us, especially in this day where international trade agreements and labor shortages continue to pressure and push companies like ours out of business. The J&D footprint in Texas was built by Jimmy and Diane, not by a gift, not by consolidation. They built it together one day at a time, methodically, over the course of 34 years through hard work, hard times, and hard weather. They have lost and they have gained. They have been handed nothing, but have grown the business so that it now supports 180 full-time employees. That is 180 families who are part of our own J&D family. And the ability to grow their organization over these 4 decades has been in no small part because they have been focused on locally grown. They have been focused on nutrition, health, access to affordable fruits and vegetables, and protecting the American farmer. And as recipient of the 2019 Vegetable Grower of the Year Award from American Vegetable Grower magazine, J&D Produce is the embodiment of the American farmer. In Texas, we have seen double-digit increases year over year for the last decade for volumes of fresh fruits and vegetables. This is a bittersweet figure. J&D has increased the volumes of our own imported products for several reasons. One, that our business is growing and demand for fresh fruits and vegetables continue to grow. Why? Simply because the population is growing and there are more mouths to feed. But we also have to import more product because we don't have the labor to harvest the volumes that are demanded by our customers. Our organization strongly believes that if this government can address our ag labor shortages now, all the farmers that are represented here today can expand their operations tomorrow.
The American farmer is being attacked on all fronts, mostly by regulations and rising resource costs. But there is no bigger disservice than preventing us from accessing the labor needed to pick our crops. We have friends who farm in West and Central Texas who are limiting the size of their plantings or simply closing their operations because the labor shortage has not been addressed since 1986. I realize today's hearing is focused on local, but I would be remiss as a farmer who prides themselves on a local aspect, who too is struggling to compete because of labor shortages. After all, you can't have local ag at our scale if you don't have a labor supply to sustain it. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today, and God bless the American farmer.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone on the panel. I am just going to, as you can see, we've had to change chairs. I'm Congresswoman Pingree from the state of Maine. I just need to say that members will be recognized for questioning in order of seniority for members who are here at the start of the hearing. After that, members will be recognized in order of arrival. Normally, the chair goes first, but I'm going to go ahead and recognize Mr. Cox of California and allow him to go first in questioning. He has 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman Pingree. No, and thank you for all the witnesses for being here. Coming from the top agricultural district in the top agricultural state, California, farmers markets are something that so many people in our communities utilize each and every day. They are absolutely fantastic at the fresh fruits and vegetables. But, you know, to maybe all of you, is that how does those local consumers impact your decisions and some of the innovations and products that you produce? Is it coming from the producers, or is it things that you decide to do yourselves, like Mr. Oliver with the oils? And if just a little bit of color on that from each of you.
Are you asking me if I was driven to produce oil because of the consumers, or how they?
Or did you decide that the consumers might want this? Was it more consumer driven, or was it something that you came up on your own?
Yes, sir. When we tasted it, we knew it couldn't be burning a tractor motor. You know, it was too good for using for that. So pretty quickly went to some local events, growing local conference, and right there I just made connections, let people taste. I had about 20 bottles of oil, and I sold them, and I knew right then just the reaction.
All right. And Ms. Brown, anything on the Virgin Islands?
I would venture to say that most of the products are consumer driven. And seasonal. So it's based on cultural practice, consumer driven, and what's available seasonally.
Mr. Erickson, you mentioned that your operation sells produce to local restaurants and regional chains, H-E-B, Kroger. And so, I mean, that's interesting. That's kind of another, I want to say step up, but what's the relationship between the local direct sales to, the individuals that come to farmers markets and selling to those types of those retailers?
For us, working with the local community, selling to local restaurants, participating in local food fairs, we've got a South Texas 10-15 Onion Festival that we participate in. Any one of those, anytime we do something local like that, A, we see it as an opportunity to invest and connect with the local community, but B, that's a consumer, that's a potential customer for us who goes to the grocery store and sees our Little Bear label and says, oh, I met those folks. I saw them at the Onion Festival, or I saw them at the school fair when they donated the salad bar or whatever it is. Every time we connect with somebody at the local level, that's a potential customer who we hope then goes to the store, sees our label, talks to their family, and spreads the word in that way.
Yeah, and then I guess I'm going to imagine that you all sell to local restaurants, and it'd be interesting. How do you cultivate those types of relationships?
By going to the restaurants. When we have a lot of foodies at our operation. I'm one of them. We're very passionate about food, cooking, about connecting fruits and vegetables to people. So those are really personal relationships that, when you go to a restaurant and you start to visit with the manager or the chef at the restaurant, you let them know, hey, we're J&D Produce, we're Little Bear brand. Oh yeah, we know your product. You guys have shishitos in season? Yeah, we've got shishitos in season. And so it's an organically grown relationship, I would say, just because we and the people who work at our operation are like to go out to eat, you talk about the company you work for, and then the next thing you know, you're selling shishitos or arugula or kales or whatever it may be, and they're proudly putting that on their menus as well. Little Bear, proudly featuring Little Bear brand, locally grown.
Fair enough. It's unfortunate we only are limited 5 minutes of time because we could have a longer conversation about it because it's just fantastic the way they've grown. But I did want to hit on what you were talking about, which is farm labor and the lack of labor and the labor supply out there. And you're probably aware of the Farm Worker Modernization Act, which was passed by the House this year.
Yes, sir.
And would that be beneficial to your operation?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Absolutely, we are, as an industry, as a business, we are now going to use H-2A for the first time in our company's history. It is incredibly expensive, incredibly burdensome. We have been waiting 34 years, this industry has been waiting 34 years for help on immigration or ag labor issues and reform. We are supportive of it. Yeah, it needs a lot of work. We hope the Senate can make some changes and then it can come back. There's some changes for sure that need to be done, but we have to get this done because U.S. fruit and vegetable specialty crop growers, there's no doubt, we are being put out of business and squeezed, and imports are on the rise dramatically.
Right. Yeah, I think we're out of time, but please talk to your local senator.
Thank you, sir.
Ranking Member Dunn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank all the witnesses for coming here today and sharing your insights of your businesses. Mr. Erickson, I bet when most people are thinking about a local farm, they're not thinking about a 2,000-acre grower, shipper, packer operation in South Texas, but it's clear that your participation in the local agriculture has solidified relationships for you at home and with your customers. So can you walk us through some of the details about how you enter local marketing channels?
As I mentioned before, it's very organic. We sign up for a lot of local food events. We work with the local restaurants. We cultivate relationships with the local restaurants. There's an event called held by the Livestock Show. It's a fruit and vegetable judging competition. We work with the FFA kids and the 4-H kids. We open our farm to those kids to come out. They harvest certain products, all the different commodities. There's got to be 50 different items at the show, and the kids harvest it, and they're judged just like a livestock show would go, but the bunches of cilantro are laid out, and growers or buyers of that product will come out and judge the kids. So all those opportunities are ways to connect with local.
Thank you for engaging the 4-H and the FFA kids like that. I think that's a great thing to do. I also want to ask you about, we have jurisdiction over pesticides in this committee, and that's an issue that gets pretty overheated in discussions sometimes, but local agriculture provides a great opportunity for you to establish dialogues with customers about use. I and many of our colleagues are interested in increasing agricultural literacy among the consumers and identifying ways to build trust between the consumers and the producers. Have you seen that opportunity in your business?
A week doesn't go by where I'm answering a question or questions about our pesticide use, fertilizer usage. A lot of that comes through social media. We get questions from customers all over the country. And also out of Canada. We sell in the U.S. and we sell product in Canada. We get a lot of questions, but it's about focusing on the aspects of sustainability. There's nobody else than a farmer who wants to be able to sustain the land and take care of the land, following labels, adhering to the labels that are necessary, making sure you're meeting your requirements as far as pre-harvest intervals. And so I have a lot of conversations with folks. That's something that I think we have a responsibility to do, to talk about the importance of pesticides, how they can they're a benefit in a way, and we can use less fuel by doing a better job of applying and using new technology, spot applications and GPS technology. So, it's an ongoing conversation day to day. We have that in our local community. We get it through social media, and it's a drum you have to beat, but there is a lot of misinformation obviously out there.
Thank you for that. So can you give us a sense of how much of your production goes to local versus wholesale commercial distribution?
Local being defined as like staying in the state of
Local,
Texas.
region, yeah, sort of stay in the region. I guess what I would say, direct marketing to the restaurants, the farmers market.
I would. It's a pretty small percent if you're talking about direct marketing to restaurants. Direct marketing to regional retailers like H-E-B, who is they're only in Texas. That's the regional retailers. They're probably 30-40% of our business, I would say. Direct to local businesses in the Rio Grande Valley and local consumers who love our brand and say, hey, I want to come by the shed and buy a box of produce from you directly. Logistically, that's a pain in the butt, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's a very small margin that we sell to direct locally within the Edinburgh.
All right, I just wanted to get a sense of that. And on closing, I'd like to reinforce your comments on the ag workers. We got to find a way to do guest workers. It's a shame that I didn't know it was 34 years of problems, but it certainly has been a problem ever since I've been here. And I promise you, we think about it all the time. I don't think we've got an answer just yet, but we'll take your input. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ranking Member. Mr. Delgado of New York.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, all the individuals, witnesses today, for your very illuminating testimony. Now, I represent upstate New York, Hudson Valley, Catskills areas, the 8th most rural seat in the country. We had about 5,000 farms in the district, 97% of which are family-owned farms, and they're small, real small, family-owned farms. We don't have big ag, we don't have corporate-based ag. We have about 163 towns that make up my district, covering 8,000 square miles, and a collection of these farms on a very small scale that represent the backbone and preserve the rural quality of life. And to be frank with you, they're under siege, given some of the national trends around consolidation and the focus on big ag at times that is pushing a lot of the small farmers, particularly dairy farmers, to the brink. And what I've tried to do, working with folks back home, is think about the ways in which we can create localized ecosystems, self-sustaining ecosystems that reinforce what these farmers do for our community at home. And that really boils down to increasing the market share, whether that's access to schools, access to small businesses, access to hospitals, access to military bases, whatever the case might be. What are we doing through these types of funding programs that allow us to build a marketplace that is more localized and self-sustaining? So this testimony to me, and particularly the testimony of Ms. Zima, your testimony I thought was incredibly spot on for my thinking through this process. And so I'm curious, when you think about the different ways in which these programs have facilitated, and you were really smart in illuminating the different dynamics, but you also highlighted a couple things that I want to just piggyback off of. You said that local and regional food systems are typically carried out by smaller and in some cases under-resourced community organizations. And these organizations know the communities in which they are embedded and should be integral to local and regional food and farm system development. Totally agree with that. But you said to do their job well, they need more technical assistance than they are currently receiving, both for grant application, development, and carrying out grant requirements successfully. So my first question is on that. When you say technical assistance, are you talking about bodies on the ground? Are you talking about agents, from the various departments here in D.C., or specifically something else? And then the other question is, we can do more through technical assistance from USDA to help all FMPP and LFPP and VAPG grant recipients to apply for grants and deliver successfully to these grants, the deliverables on the ground. So I guess it's kind of the same kind of question, but what specifically, when you think about the localized infrastructure, can we be building out to help facilitate these programs and get the deliverables that we desire?
Thank you for the question. I worked on a bull stud up in Upper New York a few decades ago, so I know upstate New York a wee bit.
Excellent.
And I was a judge for the value-added producer grants several years ago. And of course, we are one of those under-resourced organizations that try to get grants. The grant application process itself is formidable. I'm mentoring a fair number of young farmers or organizations, even in upstate Minnesota, upper northern Minnesota. All college grads, wonderfully talented people, and they are struggling just to figure out how to get the DUNS number, how to get the SAM, all of that. And then if you don't renew your password every month, then the system blows up on you, and it takes you a few more months to get back in the system. So the process itself to get the money is formidable. Think about people that do not have access to it. Think of people that don't have good rural internet access. So it works good for people who have resources. But what about the people who don't? Right? And sometimes we often say, everybody has a seat at the table. Not if you don't know where the table is, right? So that's where I think that we need to do much better outreach. I'm guessing in New York, in rural New York, as in rural Minnesota, our infrastructure that used to exist to do good local food no longer exists. And so we're trying to rebuild that. We need more meat processing plants.
Yes.
We need more community food hubs. We need more community commercial kitchens. If we could have a community commercial kitchen in every town, so that it allows the people that are indigenous to those communities bring up their cultural foods and grow those and serve those to. So the one question about, does the consumer lead the products in farmers markets, or a lot of times our vendors are the consumers, right? They've got a product that they love and they then sell it at the market. So it is for us that what I have seen in my experience, it takes a savvy person in order to get these applications through the door and then to get all of the evaluations done correctly. And that is not always easy, right, for people that don't have access.
I mean, I wish I can keep going, but I'm gonna. I really appreciate that, and the rural broadband piece is critically important as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. LaMalfa from California.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. I just appreciate the panelists being here. Obviously, local markets and the ability to touch your consumers as close to home as possible is certainly has great value, and it certainly is something very loved by the communities. I'm a farmer myself. I grow rice in California, which doesn't quite have the same interface since it's a milled product and a little more remote in that sense, but we sure get that. We have our own California grown program, and we have a Georgia grown, and also we'll touch on a couple things here. Mr. Dunn and Mr. Erickson talking about ag labor, and well, do we have a bill for you? HR 5038 passed the House, and it's over in the Senate, so talk to your senators, please, on that. It was kind of bipartisan in the process there, and we worked really hard on that legislation in order to have a legal workforce in the country, one that has certified ag workers, and kind of get beyond this mess where we are in this gray area. And it's going to be better for the growers, it's going to be better for the workers, but I digress on that. Let me get into a couple questions here quickly and expound upon what you've been able to speak of here. First, Mr. Oliver, the work you're doing in those oils is pretty great stuff, and I'm a lot of essential oils working on in my area in California, so it's an exciting area, and I'd like to see how you've taken the bull behind the horns on that, especially as you lost your father in 2008. That's a tough year. It's got to be extremely tough. I lost my dad that year too, so hard deal. But glad to see you're doing so well, and we want to be a good through the Farm Bill and through the opportunities in that. Have folks like you be able to continue to do what you are, the vision you have. Would you talk a little bit more about the VAPG in its components of kind of shifting somewhat from the Farm Bill from the locals, farmers markets, two different aspects, and being consolidated into that. You feel like that has worked pretty well for you then in its broadness. Is that fair?
Well, the value-added producer grant worked for me, and it's really easy to get bogged down and get lost in what belongs where, and the acronyms for things are confusing. I was very fortunate to partner with someone who is in the mix with the legalese and explain things for me much better than I was able to understand on my own.
So, yeah, you did mention that the paperwork stream and the acronyms and all that has been a pretty big turnoff. Do you think you've lost opportunities? Others maybe have lost opportunities because of being bound up by that and the legal aspects?
Absolutely. I mean, I almost felt like it was to weed people out because it is so daunting.
Yeah. And so, we in Washington have been trying to get less Washington in things and more local here in some of our efforts with Interior and Agriculture to push some of the people that work in it out of DC into the more local areas. We hope this has a positive effect on, accessibility to people and having people live where the work is and learn firsthand instead of, 3,000 miles away in a marble wonderland here. So you would like us to continue to streamline that for you, and you've gotten through it, but for others, and I see a lot of heads nodding on that, and so that's something we need to take care to get
Yes,
after.
sir. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Erickson, again, you talked about local labor, local food. You talked about H-2A visas. You want to expand on that a little bit since we're pushing the ag labor thing pretty hard here?
We need help. We need help.
Yeah.
We're getting beat up. I mentioned it's been 34 years since any immigration reform has passed. We need an ag labor solution. I appreciate what's come out of the House. We have been talking to our senators. We're pressing hard with our groups. We just had a fly-in last week with producers from across the country of specialty crops working on the senators. If you look at the import volumes coming into this country through our Texas ports of entry, they have increased by almost 120% in the last 6 to 7 years. So that's displacing American agriculture, and American agriculture is having to turn towards imports to rely on filling those gaps, and a lot of it is because of the labor challenge.
Which is ridiculous because we can grow it here better, more
Absolutely.
responsibly. And when you're looking at the stuff going on in China right now, I mean, who wants that lack of confidence?
Absolutely. Honestly, sir, I look at it as a national security issue because at some point,
Yes.
so much of our product is going to be outsourced and imported that we're not going to be able to feed ourselves healthy and nutritious fruits and vegetables. And this is self-inflicted, in my opinion.
Do you want it to remain in H-2As, or do you want to expand it into an other style of ag labor?
H-2A is awful. I'd like to, it's what we've got. It's what we've got. They're making some changes to it. I would like to see a more streamlined program, absolutely, something that's more affordable and easier to use. It is a nightmare of regulatory work and requirements, and the cost is exorbitant. So it's not a sustainable situation with the current H-2A situation. It's not sustainable.
In our work on the bill, we had people that want us to just not screw it up more. They
need to improve it.
The devil they know, and see if we can refine it a a bit.
We need to refine it. They can
But a
refine
lot
it.
more refined.
We'll refine it in the Senate. We'll bring it back to you guys, and we're going to come up with something great. This has to be it. This has got to be it.
I appreciate your optimism, and please keep hanging in and keep telling us and those guys over there what you need.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're back.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleague, Ms. Pingree, for taking over for me while I was absent. When the White House calls you, I was telling Mr. Dunn, you can't say, I got to go, I got a hearing right now. So I thank you all for taking this up. And you like my hat? Thank you. These kinds of things are important. And thank you, Sommer, for being here. I'm really appreciative of you making your way up and being a part of this hearing. At this time, I recognize the Congresswoman Pingree for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me the privilege to sit in the chair for a little while and take over. And really, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful group, and you can see the committee, each person has said they wish they had a little more time to talk to you, so thank you for that. I am particularly excited to have this hearing, and I thank the chairwoman for hosting it. I was able to lead a bill called the Local Farms Act during the reauthorization of the last Farm Bill, which contained the provision that consolidated the few local programs at the USDA, and that's where we got LAMP. So for me to hear all of you talk about the local agriculture market program and how it's come together is very exciting. These are all programs that are really near and dear to my heart. Unfortunately, the president's budget just came out and it provided no funding for LAMP programs, but I'm also on agriculture appropriations, and I feel confident that we will, in a very bipartisan way, make sure that these are funded again. They have $50 million in mandatory funding. Last year, we were able to add an extra $20 million, so I hope we can keep it at the $70 million level, and you are all wonderful at speaking to how important this is. I know these programs very well. I come from the state of Maine, where we have an awful lot of small farmers, and we've seen a lot of growth in value-added farming operations. So much of what you're talking about has really built back our agriculture operations in Maine. Huge interest in local foods, in organically grown foods, and everything. So these programs, as you said, really help people to support in that. And I take to heart some of the things that you're speaking about. Unfortunately, I've heard them many times about how complicated the forms are. You shouldn't need extra assistance. And I take your point about the taxable income, and we'll certainly get to work on some of the things that you've said. I just wanted to make a couple comments about all of you, because you are so great. And thank you, Ms. Sibley Brown. I've had the good fortune to visit the Virgin Islands, and I know how challenging it is not to have more sources of local foods. And I would love to work with the chair on something that really makes it more equitable for the territories. It's ridiculously unfair, given the challenges that you have there and in the other territories, and I wish we could restructure some of that. Thank you to Ms. Seaman. I mentioned to her that my family farmed for decades in Kenyon, Minnesota, so we're right next door to your wonderful town, and consider you a former neighbor of my family, and really great to hear your stories. And again, of how some of these value-added products come about, from your dryer balls to soap, and of course, your story, Mr. Oliver. I can't wait to try the oils. I'm really, I'm excited to hear how enthusiastic you are about it, and how your family turned such a sad challenge into a really productive industry. And I think we should see a lot more of what you're doing with cold-pressed oils. And to Mr. Erickson, I thought it was wonderful to hear a Texas farmer talk about shishitos and arugula, because that just doesn't happen. Yeah, and I run a small vegetable operation, and so I know very well about the customer's interest in these things, and also some of the challenges that you spoke about. And my two friends from California here, I think we'll talk more about agricultural labor, because that's something that we hear about from farmers everywhere. But the one thing I wanted to mention not only is your pride in your local industry, and really emphatically reminding us how important it is to support American farmers, and how imbalanced we've gotten with imports and with our trade agreements, and just not understanding how important it is to have that capacity here in the United States. But I also think a business like yours talking about being able to aggregate the produce of other farmers is really important, because as one of my colleagues mentioned, not everybody can market directly to the consumer, or do they want to. And so having someone like you who can help to aggregate some of that with other farmers seems really important. So I just wanted to, I've used up most of my time, of course, but I just, again, I want to thank you. And if anyone else wants to talk about any of the other challenges that haven't come up, we're ready to go to work for you, and really continue to enhance and increase the funding for these programs. So go ahead.
If I may, ma'am, thank you for the comments. And it is so important that we're able to work with other local producers. We've been fortunate, and a lot of it is it's luck, and it's hard work, and it's timing. But we are so passionate about our local community and the growers in our region. It's in our interest to see them succeed. And those relationships that we have are incredible, and they are an important part of our business operation, and we can provide them with assistance. I hear the challenges from my fellow testimony folks up here, but I'm familiar with those. And
from the private side, we're able to help with local producers as well, helping them navigate food safety law. We've got a staff of 15 food safety people now. It's crazy. A couple of managers, a director, techs, sanitation people, but they are able to go out and help consult with the producers that we're picking up that are helping us grow our own operation. We farm a lot of our own, but we also bring in product from other growers, and we can help with a lot of different aspects: regulatory, financing, marketing, harvesting, and that from that respect as well. So we are a form, and from a private sector side, we're a form of helping grow local agriculture. That's really important to us.
Well, thank you. I've completely run out of time, so I disingenuously asked you others for comments. But you've done a great job today speaking to all of the concerns that you have. And that was one topic that didn't come up, but I know firsthand from my own operation that complying with the new rules of FSMA and being ahead of that is really hard for a small farmer. So that's a great service that you're providing to others. So thank you for that. Thank you to everybody who testified. We look forward to trying to solve some of the problems that you brought up.
Thank you. And at this time, we hear from the ranking member, Mr. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologize if thank the panel for being here. If somebody covered this when your opening remarks, but one of the issues facing particularly fruits and vegetables is with respect to food waste. Brett, I suspect that not everything you grow is suitable for HEB shelf. And what's going on in the valley to take advantage of getting food and fruits and vegetables that aren't ready for HEB to not be wasted and put back into the.
Well, first thing I'd like to say on that subject is, I think retailers should do a better job of helping to market imperfect produce because it tastes the same. It is just as healthy and nutritious. But those things that don't meet the eye test to sit on a grocery retailer shelf, we work with local food banks. We work with an organization called Brighter Bites, which they source product to get to underprivileged kids. We work with local schools and different programs locally to source that product out to those folks as much as we possibly can. Those would be the primary outlets.
So my daughter lives in Fort Worth, and they have a program where she can buy ugly fruits and vegetables. Yep. Is that an internet-based thing where they actually deliver it to her house and it comes in a sack? It's just, it comes up as what's available for the day. She picks whatever she wants and they show it up and it's, 8 carrots and one guava, whatever. But do you have that access to those kind of programs in the Valley?
We have something similar. We work with a company called, I think it's called Imperfect Produce, but I could be mistaken. But that's their whole business model. It could be the company that your daughter is getting product from. But they specialize. They're signed up and as a buyer, just like HEB or something, they would be a customer of ours, and they are looking for those imperfect items, and that's their business model. So we do sell to companies like that, and it's at a discount. It's a discounted price. But God bless them for what they're trying to do. But you see in the retail community, there's more and more programs where big retailers are also trying to capture this food waste movement and sell imperfect produce.
Well, based on your efforts, how much is left to be done in terms of getting things that are grown and all the inputs you've got, all the money invested in an imperfect apple or whatever? What percentage of your production is still not making it into stomachs?
Oh,
I'm trying to get a scope. How much further we need to do? How much more effort is necessary? Because you're going to reach the diminishing returns.
I'd say an educated guess, maybe 10% of our product is going 10 to 15%, perhaps. That's quite a bit.
Right.
So I would say that there should be a lot more focus on imperfect produce, and I think that the private sector is capturing on that. It's definitely growing in popularity. I see it in the trade press, and I see it in the retail aisles. But it does need to continue to grow because whether it's ugly or whether it's beautiful, it takes the same amount of effort and cost and input to grow that product. Right. And there's absolutely zero, things wrong with it other than the way it may look on the exterior. But the nutritional benefits and the taste and the flavor, it's all there, sir.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you for the efforts, and Madam Chairman, thank you for the hearing. Now you'll back.
Thank you. Mr. Panetta, you're next. I was told to give you a hard time, but I'm not going to do that.
What else is new? Thank you, Chair.
I will, Madam Chairman, if you'd like to pass that over to.
Oh,
And if he says salad bowl of the nation, I'm going to.
You guys are
that's his tagline.
You are close. Good morning. I'm Jimmy Panetta. I'm from the salad bowl of the world. Let's get that straight. One of these days they'll learn. Chair Plaskett, Ranking Member Dunn, Ranking Member, thank you very much for this opportunity to have this type of hearing and on something that is important, not just to my community on the Central Coast of California, but clearly to the United States and our agriculture industry. So thank you very much. In my district on the Central Coast of California, because we have so many fruits and vegetables, we have about 15 farmers market that participate in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as the WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children Supplemental Program. And obviously, these types of programs are very, very beneficial for all people, but mostly for the food insecure families that exist in my district. I mean, we have a lot of people who work in the fields, who are around fruits and vegetables every day, but unfortunately, they go home and they don't necessarily, those aren't on the products that they're picking are not necessarily on their table for them to eat, and neither for their children to eat as well. But fortunately, we do have a lot of programs. This is one of them, and we have programs in our schools as well to get their children involved in it too. But obviously, when it comes to farmers markets and providing the type of assistance necessary to help food insecure families access and have these types of fruits and vegetables, the technical assistance and the resources are necessary. And so I had the great opportunity to have dinner with Gus Schumacher back in 2016 when I was running for this position. I went to his house here in Georgetown, and we had a nice dinner with a couple of our other agriculture advocates. And I'll never forget how important it was to him that, and I told him, obviously, I've been to farmers markets, but I remember, I'll never forget his words of advice of, get out to farmers markets as much as you can. Just walk through them. Just be there. Be present. It means a lot to the people who are working there, and a lot to the customers as well. So, obviously, I do believe in farmers markets. I believe in the words of Gus. But obviously, there are other things that can go into helping the farmers markets get to our food insecure families. The electronic benefit transfer, the EBTs. Now, I know, Ms. Seaman, you talked about that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the challenges that people have in dealing at farmers markets with some of these benefits that help provide these types of resources, especially when it comes to the EBT?
In Minnesota, we know that, thank you for the question. In Minnesota, we know that about 2/3 of our markets have volunteer market managers. So the market itself does not make enough money to pay a manager. And yet, great local community development, right, and local food sheds. So when you bring SNAP in, then it costs the market on average about $1,500. So now we're gathering money, resources out of the community that could be going to other places just to get the machine in, get all the swiping in. We have some markets that have 7 different colored tokens. There's an app for everything, right? So could we get an app that if I'm the farmer and I have SNAP eligible products, can't you just come up and swipe just with me? Otherwise, right now we have this information tent, and we've got the machines, we've got all the colored coded tokens, and then people come up and now that there's a lot of different tokens, it's not such sometimes it was embarrassing if you're the only one getting SNAP, but now there's SNAP and there's Powered Produce and there's debit cards and there's credit cards, and then there's the medical industries are coming in with some benefits too. It gets to be a big management, and then you have to manage all of that so you can measure, right, what you're doing. It's a financial burden on the markets. It's wonderful for the SNAP participants. It's wonderful for our produce farmers, right, and all of the farmers that produce those products. But it is a huge burden for the market itself. If we could remove that burden, if we could just come in with that support, those resources, then you would have that. And I agree with you. The first time that we did the Good Food Access in Minnesota, the American Heart Association found us. And I'm like, how did you find farmers markets? And she responded, because your farmers are on SNAP. And how sad is that, right? That we produce the food, and yet we have farmers on SNAP. That is not fair, and it's not right.
Understood, understood. And I guess also in regards to Mr. Schumacher, obviously he has a nutrition incentive program. Can you walk us through how that works real quick in the 14 seconds that I left you to do that?
Well, in Minnesota, we have our own market bucks, so it's just a dollar-for-dollar match, and I'm guessing that's what Gus Schumacher, that used to be the Finney program, right? So I'm not as knowledgeable in that program as they are, what we do in Minnesota.
Fair enough. Great. Thank you again to all of you for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ma'am, if you could just elaborate, the ranking member and I had a question with regard to the small farmers and utilization. Do those same cards allow you to use Square or some of the other mechanisms for
We can use,
with food stamps?
sorry, thank you. We can use Square for our debit and credit card, but we can't for SNAP.
You
Because
can't use
to
this.
yeah,
The SNAP cards cannot be used for that.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're wondering if that's something that we could take up with the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah. And additionally, again, Sommer's going to have a comment there too. Additionally, so when WIC goes to EBT, right, EBT just means electronic benefit transfer. So when WIC does, we just heard in Minnesota that they're going to be two not compatible systems. So we'd have to literally have now two machines instead of, so if we could, if as food programs become EBT, if they could all use the same software and the same machines, the card reader machines, that would be wonderful.
Hey, we're having the staff write that down right now, so we'll look into it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carbajal, salud.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And these hearings are always amazing because you hear about things that should work, but they don't work. And I appreciate all that we're hearing about the EBT as it relates to SNAP and WIC. This isn't so technical that we shouldn't be able to fix it. So this is my second term in Congress. And when I hear these things, I think, how often does it need to be said for it to be fixed? So I'm really hopeful that this example today is one that we could work on to show how Congress or the administration can work on small things, but that impact a lot of people. So I appreciate my colleague raising these issues. I represent the Central Coast, the real Central Coast of California, which produces a wide range of specialty crops from the fruits and vegetables Americans eat every day, including wine grapes and cut flowers. A significant percentage of farmers in my district participate in farmers markets and other types of direct-to-consumer sales. In fact, in the 3 counties that I represent, there are 36 different certified farmers markets. The creation of the Local Agriculture Market Program, LAMP, in 2018 Farm Bill was an important step forward in supporting this growing sector of ag industry. I am looking forward to working to continue to support this growth despite the president zeroing out of this program from 20 million to 0. Ms. Seaman, our testimony includes interesting statistics from markets you observed last year. Specifically, your data shows that 24% of vendors were under the age of 35, 74% of businesses were women-owned, and 35% of vendors were people of color. What drivers are influencing this strong diversity of vendors at your farmers markets? And how can we continue to support young farmers, women, and people of color through agricultural markets?
Thank you. So if we could get more grants, we would be able to get better data on the background on that. But our observation would be that if you think about farmers markets, it's a really low entry cost, right? You don't need to have 2,000 acres. You don't need to inherit a bunch of land from your ancestors. You can get in relatively quickly. You can have a raised garden bed, 2 foot by 4 foot, right? 1 acre of land can produce enough produce for 25 families in a CSA model. So the reason that you're seeing our young people, our people of color, all of us that are not part of the commodity ag world, we get in because it's easy, it's really cheap to get in. And then you use your own skills and your own talents, right? When you're working for yourself, in farmers market world, we do not worry about trade wars or tariffs. We are impervious to them. They don't touch us. We are hyper-local. We buy from each other. We grow it ourselves. So you don't mind working, 24 hours a day because it's something you love. It's your passion, and it's food, and it's your culture. And that's what farmers markets do.
Thank you. To all witnesses, many of you have pointed to the struggles that smaller agriculture production face. I have heard from farmers in my district that meeting the Food Safety Modernization Act compliance deadlines have proven to be a challenge for smaller operations. The purpose of these requirements are to create a preventative food safety system that is itself sustaining. How are these rules impacting small farmers who sell directly to the public, such as at farmers markets? To all of you, or any of you.
Hello, morning, Sommer, Sibley, Brown. In the Virgin Islands, where we have a large forage production population, so we have a lot of fruit trees, we have a lot of organic, and people would go and forage from their yards or neighboring land spaces. It presents an issue for, like, one of the Food Modernization Act safety rules is that it cannot be touched by a bird, right? In forage production, that means iguanas, birds, lizards, all these things climb trees. So that would make nothing that our farmers forage eligible to be sold or eligible for the criteria in the Food Safety Modernization Act. So when farmers were trained in the Virgin Islands, that alone, because they trained 25 farmers, was a barrier in terms of what would enter the market.
Thank you. Anyone else?
In Minnesota, we've got the University of Minnesota Extension and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture have pursued a really quite aggressive education program. So we've got about 1,800. USDA thinks we have 3,400 produce farmers. We think we've got 1,900 on record right now. We've made it the 8-day fire hose of training for the FSMA PSR. We've made it very, $35 gets all of our produce farmers in. We've trained a lot of produce farmers. To date, it's just food safety. For those of us that have sold meat and milk, we've dealt with regulations for centuries, or decades maybe, not centuries. It's new for produce, so I'm not sure how much it is. I think when the water rules hit, that I'm a little bit concerned about. In fact, I've been floating the idea in Minnesota that we might need to put some money out there for some of those water tests, because for farmers that are using surface water, that's going to be expensive to do those tests year-round.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if you'll allow me, since I seem to be the last one speaking, I would love to ask Mr. Erickson, if allowed, if he could touch on the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, something that attempts to address some of the concerns that have existed with the H-2A program, and some legislation that myself and many other members here, Representative LaMalfa, Representative Panetta, have been a great part of, and I'm wondering what your take is on that legislation that passed the House.
Please answer the question, but always remember, I always have the last word.
Madam Chair, absolutely.
I feel like this is a last shot for us, for a lot of us. That sounds maybe dramatic, but when you look at the numbers, walk through your retail grocery store and look at the shelves, look what's on the shelves. For specialty crop producers in the United States, I fear that the horse is already out of the barn, because we should have done something 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. This is it. We are, what came out of the House, thank you to all of you who supported it. And yeah, it's not perfect. We're not going to get perfect. We know we're not going to get perfect because all the sides want different things, but we've got to have compromise on this. We've got to have compromise. We're working hard on our folks in the Senate. We know it can be improved. There's areas for improvement. Let's get it out of the Senate. We're telling them, get it out of the Senate. And we know it won't be perfect coming out of the Senate. Let's bring it back and conference it. But we, as fruit
You
and vegetable
support it?
producers, absolutely.
Thank you.
Let me make that, yeah, absolutely. Over 250 organizations, fruit and vegetable organizations and producer organizations in the United States supported it. The vast majority of producers are, the mushroom folks, the dairy folks, we have to get this done. We have to get this done because as an industry, we are being squeezed out. No doubt about it. We are being squeezed out, and it's been happening, and it's happening faster as the U.S. demand increases. It's more opportunity for imports to, and for them to gain traction there, and we're being stifled. Our business is, for the last 5 or 6 years, we can't grow as much as we want to in terms of the business because we don't have the people to harvest the product. We don't have enough. That's our bottleneck.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. I don't want to be chastised by our chairwoman, but thank you,
thank you
for your thorough answer. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to ask that last question.
Sure, definitely. It was needed information. I have my 5 minutes now of questions. And the first question I actually have is to you, Mr. Oliver. I wanted to know if you could talk about value-added food processing. In the Virgin Islands, this is something that we've been looking at for our smaller farmers to work as a cooperative together to implement value-added food processing to support some of the things that Sommer Sibley talked about so that we can move to exporting rather than just having internal food production.
Yeah, the value of the value-added producer grant coupled with cooperatives is exponential what it could do. We've recently joined a cooperative, and it has allowed us access to markets I would normally attend, couldn't physically be there, and access to new groups of people that, again, wouldn't be there. And the grant definitely can allow the entrepreneurial spirit to flourish. It can give you those means to take the chances or processing or equipment. You can't buy equipment with it. Now, let me back up there. You can't buy the equipment, but for labor or training, it would definitely give you the funds to support that. And, my mind was racing like, wow, what kind of oil could I press from things down there, in the Virgin Islands?
A lot.
We'll talk.
Right, and that's an opportunity, maybe, oil processing from native plants and seeds down there.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Ms. Seaman, I wanted to ask you, some of your work has been involved, although you're working in a rural area, working with urban areas. I think about the fact that my home here in D.C., I can be in this area here on Capitol Hill where there's a wealth of food. And then as soon as I cross the Anacostia Bridge to where my home is, I enter a food desert. In the same way, even on a small island, like on the island that I live on, St. Croix, with so much food around, housing communities like Ario Diaz and others are in food deserts. Can you talk to me a little bit about how your work, farmers play in serving these underserved minority communities or other communities?
We do. Interestingly, a lot of those folks in those are doing a lot of their work themselves, like Appetite for Change. I just recently figured out that we weren't really doing any education on youth produce. Used to be in 4-H and FFA. No longer. So Appetite for Change, urban Minneapolis ag is doing it for their kids, right? And they just did this wonderful rap song. It's all over Facebook. It's been viral. So it is education. It's also figuring out, though, how to get them resources to do that value added. So to the point about the imperfect produce, not everything is perfect, right? But what if we could get commercial kitchens in that people could access and then take the dinged up tomato and pepper and make it into salsa? So in Minnesota, we have a fairly progressive cottage food law that allows people to do only food safety, so only the non-potentially hazardous foods, but you can make it in your home kitchen as long as you follow certain food safety requirements. And then you can grow all your own, so you can sell the good stuff at your farmers markets or locally. Take the imperfect and make those into a value-added product. The same person, all of that. And it can be youth. It doesn't have to be just adults. So it takes a village to get all of that done. There's a lot of pieces, but we've got some pretty smart people in Minneapolis and St. Paul pursuing that.
Thank you.
We're actually coming in under. They're taking the lead.
Thank you. And I say that also in the Virgin Islands, like we cannot compete with Guatemala for mangoes. but we could compete on mango chutneys or jams or preserves and things like that. Sommer, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the possibility of farmers working with local hotels and cruise lines. I know that my colleague, Mr. Cox, talked a little about it. What's the current relationship between agriculture industry and tourism, and how can we strengthen that relationship?
So the current relationship between ag and tourism in the Virgin Islands, I think, is actually broken. I think at one point they were under the same umbrella. It used to be the Department of Tourism and Agriculture, and I think they were working to increase that as agritourism is now a reality. I have had the benefit of speaking to like cruise lines, and what they're looking for is increased production, but also a barrier is crop insurance. So I think there is an entry point that the Department of Tourism could actually make happen if we could get over the hurdle of aggregation and crop insurance. So having farmers produce cooperatively, store that food, and then consistently provide it for the cruise ships. So it really, that relationship can build if we have some investments in the infrastructure.
And then one of the things we always talk about back home is the expensive imports.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that impact local farmers dealing with the cost of importing things?
So that impacts us tremendously because everything we need to grow food has to be imported. So we're talking about, we don't have any seed banks, so we're talking from the seed to the packaging boxes. Farmers have to import those because we don't have packaging plants. Heavy equipment, services like organic certification or audits are all imported. So it dramatically, food that could be cheaper becomes more expensive because the level of individual input the farmer has to put in. That will only level up if we can get our production to, to meet a certain scale where now farmers are doing these things together. So we are in like the perpetual chicken and egg where farmers trying to produce food locally have to exert so much without enough inputs, then the product becomes more expensive. We are a socially disadvantaged area, so then we don't have many people who can afford to buy that product. And the SNAP and EBT benefits become a challenge because our farmers don't have the individual infrastructure to actually benefit from it. So where there's all these answers that are available, our true issue is how do we build a unique place-based infrastructure for a small territory like the Virgin Islands? And I would venture to say American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Marianas are sharing the same issues as many rural places might be as well.
Thank you. And I want to give some time to my good friend, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Ranking Member. I apologize for being late. I had a hearing right down the hall on the Voting Rights Act reauthorization. So it's another committee I'm on, but I think it's very important what many of you testified on today. And during the 2018 Farm Bill negotiations and that entire process, I was able to meet with many of my local groups to really discuss their priorities. And back home, I sat down with several local farmers and producers in conjunction with the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. Met them at Green Top Grocery in Bloomington, Illinois. It's a co-op grocery store where we discussed the benefits of the LAMP program. And I was glad to see the program was ultimately included in the bill that we passed on a bipartisan basis. Ms. Seaman, I appreciate your constructive feedback regarding the ways in which the LAMP program can be improved, especially for these local producers who may not have all the tools to be successful in their applications. You proposed in your testimony waiving some or part of the matching requirement for certain organizations. Can you please describe specific ways in which the USDA and Congress, as we look toward the next Farm Bill, may be able to help prospective applicants be successful outside of waiving the matching requirement?
Mr. Oliver used a grant person to help. If you can't waive, because I would understand there might be a fairness, and how would you figure out how to do that fairly and justly? If there would be money available, so you could always pay an expert grant writer, that would help immensely. If a grant writer could be the one that has the numbers and the accounts and then just let all of our young farmers on the value-added producer grant, that's a formidable process. I review those grants. They're 100 pages long. I can't imagine some farmers trying to get that done, right? So if there would be a system where we would have expert grant writers to help just get the process to go through, the idea and the work is still on the farmer's market or the farm side, but that process we could offshoot it to that, unless you could waive the fee for some. That 25% that's a lot of money like my association, 70% of our budget is grants. Only 30% can we raise off membership dues, right? So we are very grant heavy, and we can't use other grants to be the matching grant. Otherwise, that's magic math, and a lot of that isn't allowed. So it's really hard to come up with that unless you're already a heavily resourced agency. Right. So that then leaves out a lot of people because a lot of us aren't heavily resourced. And then there are the people that don't even know any of that, right? Mm-hmm. So in other words, we're giving money to people that already have money, and we're leaving the rest of them outside.
Well, I appreciate your responses. Instead of maybe waiving a matching requirement at the federal level, maybe we allow for state partnerships, state programs to be considered, an ability to match that program. At some point, we want to build out the prioritization. If the federal government leads, we'd like to see the states get engaged in this process too. I look forward to working with you and your association and other associations as we move into the next Farm Bill. And Mr. Oliver, you use this program, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any comments?
As we've been saying, the paperwork is very daunting. The being taxed on.
The government paperwork is not just, its problem is not just limited to the LAMP program.
Understood. Yes, sir. The fact that you get taxed on this, though you've made the money and I spend my money for whatever I'm to be reimbursed on, and then at the end of the year I get a paper saying there's taxable income, and in my case $250,000. I spread over 3 years, but some people do it in a year. That's a wallop to be added to, your income there, which just doesn't seem fair there. I would definitely say that could be changed.
Okay. Well, thank you. And real quick, Mr. Erickson, I'm pleased to see that your company works with 4-H and FFA. I think they're two indispensable programs that help create some of our nation's leaders, not just in agriculture, but in government and all throughout our great economy. There's some challenges that lie ahead for both those organizations. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're giving them a fantastic learning opportunity working with you. Can you actually tell us a bit more about how you're making sure these folks that belong to the FFA and 4-H are engaged in what you do?
Absolutely. Mostly it's bringing these kids out to the farm. We have an open door policy with these organizations. We host a lot of tours with them. I mentioned earlier that there's a big fruit and vegetable and citrus show that happens down in the valley. We invite all these kids to come out. Our farmers teach the kids about how the product grows, about how to select a product in the field, how to make bunches, about the harvesting, about the marketing aspects. So we recognize that these kids are these are the future leaders that are going to hopefully they'll be up here in Washington D.C. They'll be at our state legislature. They'll be working for J&D Produce hopefully one of these days. Doing director of marketing or working on accounting or sales or as a farm manager or whatever it may be. These kids are our future, and we definitely understand the need and allocate a lot of time and tours, donations, and training and education to these kids as a private organization.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The ranking member, for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that after hearing our testimony here today, we had a hopeful note. We may be able to help customers who have EBT cards, the SNAP cards. If we can connect them with the farmers markets, I think that's good for them as well as for the farmers market. Maybe we can find a simple solution there, I pray. I also heard again how important it is to everybody, farmers, foresters, and ranchers, to have a good working guest worker program in the ag field. And we just have to tackle this, and we have to get this done. We can't lard it up a whole bunch of things that people wish for. We just have to get it done for the farmers, and I hope we do. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yield back.
Thank you. I just want to, I'm reminded that in the hearing last year, the subcommittee talked about some of these issues as well. At that time, one of the witnesses was a representative from, in the Virgin Islands, Ridge to Reef Farm on the island of St. Croix. That farm, despite being impacted by multiple natural disasters, the territory's only organic farm has been able to, through local market opportunities, such as community-supported agriculture program, a farm stand, multiple farmers markets, and agritourism experiences. Other farming operations in the Virgin Islands, if they follow suit, I believe the territory's farmers and ranchers can work to meet the demands of their communities, decrease our overall dependency on expensive imports, and foster innovative partnerships with local restaurants in our thriving tourism industry. The economic potential exists, but my producers need resources and technical assistance to successfully make these business decisions. Because of our geographic location, as you've heard from the witness today, farmers in the Virgin Islands, similar to those in rural areas, struggle to receive competent and competitive grants for food processing. These are the many challenges we face every day, and I'm glad we had an opportunity to speak on those things. The growth in value-added programs is a great step in the right direction. We must look for an equitable way to assist our farmers in growth and productions. In our islands, the Virgin Islands, we import 90% of our food. We'd love to come to a place where we're much more sustainable and reliant on ourselves. We encourage farmers markets such as the annual agricultural fair coming up in a week, where farmers have an opportunity to showcase their best products. Programs like LAMP contribute to the growing markets. This is personal for me. Farmers in the Virgin Islands want to compete, and I thank you, our witness, Sommer Sibley, for highlighting their challenges. I want to thank all of our witnesses for their valuable testimony. Mr. Erickson, Mr. Oliver, Ms. Neiman, your testimony is really advancing, and we've identified some areas where we think we can work and support you all in the work that you're doing. I hope that we as a subcommittee can continue to support local agricultural markets moving forward. This time, this hearing stands adjourned. Members have 10 business days to supplement or add to the record.